Hi again, this will be a continuation of our discussion of CALayer and UI bezierpath. And what I'd like to do in this video is talk about CAGradientLayer, okay? And then we'll combine that with our path in a minute, or in another video, right? So in our last video, we created sort of a dashed line that kind of begins from about 3/8 and ends at about 9/8 along the arc, right? And what I'd like to do now is add a gradient layer behind this, okay? So let's do that, right? I'll go into to Xcode here, and I'm still working in the circle path view class. So we made a special view class to hold our art here that we're creating with code, right? And what I want to do is I'm going to add a new property here called I'll call it grad layer, for short for gradient layer, right? Equals CA gradient layer. Okay, so I'll just make one of these just like I made the shape layer. And then what I want to do is in my initializer here, and you could break this out into another function if you like. I'm just going to keep it kind of in the initializer here just for convenience, right? It'd be better to refactor this later, but just to get us started here, I'll just keep things simple, right? So we've created the gradient layer here, and what I need to do is I need to add it as a sublayer. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I add it as a sublayer before I add the shape layer as a sublayer, because I want the shape layer to be in front of the gradient layer. Okay, so when you add these things as layers, the order that you add them in layers sets the stacking order, and the first one is on the bottom, and then the second one goes on top, right? And you can change. There's a couple of methods for rearranging them, but it's kind of easier just to add them in the correct order, right? So we'll start here. We'll say the first layer that we're going to add is we'll do add sublayer. The first layer we add is gradient layer, right? And then afterwards we'll add the shape layer. Okay. So now we've got a gradient layer. What do we want to do? Let's make the gradient layer fill the entire view. So what we'll do is we'll say gradient layer dot frame equals bounds. So what I'm doing here is I'm setting the frame of the gradient layer. That's the rectangle. It's the location, the x and y, and the width and height. And I'm making it match the bounds. So the bounds is as a frame that describes the internal space of this view. And by setting the frame to the bounds of our parent view, this frame will essentially fill the interior of the parent view, right? Okay, so that's pretty good. So next, we have to put some colors in the gradient, so that it can move through those colors, right? So, you know what I mean? So it can fade from one color to the next. The gradient layer has a property called colors, and you can see here it's an array of any, right? Really, this is going to be an array of CG colors for us, right? So, so we need to set this to an array, but now we need some colors, right? So we could put the colors in here, but they'll be really long. They'll kind of go off the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do two colors. I'll do, how about red? Right, we'll say red equals UI color dot red dot CG color, and then I'll say yellow equals UI color dot yellow dot CG color. Okay, and since this is an any, you can actually just put a UI color in there, but then it doesn't work, right? So it's got to be CG color here, right? So we'll add red here and yellow after it. Okay, so let's give that a try and see what we get, right? Okay, there's our gradient, right? And there's our other circle drawing on top of the gradient. We're gonna have to move this in a little bit. It kind of half the stroke ends up on the outside, right? But we can fix that, right? Maybe this green and red doesn't, or the red, maybe this should be green instead of red, because then we'd be able to see the red. But don't worry, we can change the colors later, right? So anyway, so that's working pretty good. Maybe I'll just change this for right now from red to black, right? So that way our stroke will be black. So I just went down here to the shape layer stroke color, right, and set the UI color to black. And then now here's our line, right? So that's looking a little better, right? So what about the gradient here? You know, I like the gradient, but what if I want it to go at an angle? Like I don't want it to go top to bottom, or I want it to go left to right, okay? So let's talk a little more about the gradient layer. Okay, so besides having a color property, gradient layer also has a start point and an end point. Okay, and end point and start point are both CG point, so they take, you know, an X and a Y value, and these the start and end points, the two values, the X and Y value, range from 0 to 1. Okay, so when you set the start point, you're saying like where the gradient begins on the X and Y axis, and if here we'll go back to our project here, like if this is our gradient, right? If the X is 0, then we're all the way on the left side. If X is 1, we're all the way on the right. Okay, and the same goes for the Y value. So if Y is 0, we're all the way at the top, and if Y is 1, we're all the way at the bottom. So if the start point was 0x and 0y, it would start in this corner, and if the end point was 1x and 1y, we would be ending in this corner down here, and the gradient would go diagonally. Okay, let's give it a try. So what we'll do is we'll say, you know, start point equals CG point, and then we'll set the X to 0 and the Y to 0, and then we'll do gradient layer dot end point equals CG point of 1 and you know, 1, like this, right? And then we'll test it. Oh, there we go. So now we're kind of gradient from here to here diagonally, right? Okay, so that's pretty good. Let's bring in the circle arc here. I use the CX for the width. Let's make it like a little bit smaller than that. So our radius here, I'm going to go to radius CX. Let's make that, let's subtract like 10 from that, right? And that should bring our line in a little bit so it doesn't run outside of our rectangle, right? Oh, that fits in nicely, right? Okay, so let's do one more step, right? So I like this, but really I don't want the gradient back here. I want the gradient to fill the stroke, right? So this is like inside the black area, we're seeing the red to orange gradient, okay? So this is like one quick extra step. Every layer has a mask property, and you can set another layer to act as the mask, right? So when something acts as a mask, essentially its alpha channel, you know, or the area that you cut out the shapes in that layer are what shows through on the layer that you're masking. Okay, so right here we have two layers. I got one layer that's the gradient layer, and I have another layer that's the line. So what I want to do is I'm gonna use the line layer, the shape layer, as a mask for the gradient layer. So wherever we would have seen the line, we'll just see the gradient layer, and everything else in the gradient layer will be masked out. So I'm going to go all the way to the bottom here. Well, not quite all the way to the bottom, but I'm going to go after, you know, below here where I've created that stuff. I guess actually maybe I don't even need to do that. I was thinking I needed to draw this first, but maybe we'll just put it here. We'll do this. We'll say gradient layer, because I actually define the shape layer up above, so it won't matter, but I'll say gradient layer dot mask, right, which can be a CA layer, right? And we'll set that equal to shape layer. Okay, so the gradient layer's mask will be the shape layer. Let's give it a try. Oh, wait a minute. I made a mistake there. Let's see if we can fix that. Right? What did I do there? I did gradient layer. Maybe I do have to put this afterwards. Yeah, you know why? Maybe I have to draw this thing first and set the drawing. Let me put it down here at the bottom. Yeah, sorry about that. I thought that was what I needed to do, but then I thought maybe not. Anyway, there we go, right? So now we got our line there. And as I drag it along there, you can see that inside the line here in the dashes, we're getting the gradient, right? So, and you can use the mask property on a lot of things, right? So I'm just doing it here, and this is like a really interesting way to use it, but there's like actually a lot of really creative ideas that you can do with the mask. Like the mask makes a lot of things possible that would seem really difficult. Okay, so anyway, so thanks for watching, and I hope that this is useful to you and helpful in your projects.